Thank you for coming today. I'm going to start out with a video that I think really captures exactly what I'm going to talk about. I do want to give you a little warning that some of the images that you're going to see are sexual in nature. So if you need to just look away, I understand, but just a quick warning. Here it goes.
Looking for smaller, lighter, far higher, thinner, softer. It really works.
Thank you. My project is called The Truth of Advertising to Adolescent Girls. And what you just saw, that is our culture. That is the advertising culture that we live in. Oftentimes people really think that advertising is a direct reflection of our culture, which it is not, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But this is how adolescent girls feel that they should look like, how they should become, and they're leaving with questions like, am I perfect now? Things like that. The goal of my project was to determine areas of low self-esteem for the adolescent girls and to teach them about their identity and this facade of women in advertising. In order to do this, I decided to develop a pilot study in which I created a learning unit entitled Truth, and I taught them about this facade that I was just talking about, the images that you saw, about some of the messages that they would see. But before we started the learning unit, I made them do a drawing activity where they were asked to draw two pictures. I first asked them to draw a picture of themselves. You know, just draw a picture of yourself, all your characteristics, didn't give them any other specifics other than that. So they had a free rein to draw whatever they wanted. Then I asked them to draw their ideal self, their dream self, what they aspire to look like, what they really wish they could be, if they could look like anything in the world. We'll talk more about that later. And then finally, before we started the learning, I also gave them a pre-test which talks about their media consumption beforehand, and then it also measured their confidence. And then the post-test after the learning unit was measuring their confidence as well. So my learning unit, which was a major part of my project, really emphasized a lot about the purpose of advertising, some of the facts and things that go with it. What people don't realize is that you are exposed to 2,000 advertisements every day. You might not realize it, you might not register it in your mind, but you're exposed to over 2,000 advertisements every day. And as I mentioned earlier, advertising is oftentimes looked at as a mirror, a reflection of our culture. But unfortunately, that mirror is distorted, especially for women. Women are oftentimes objectified and just seen as sexy or all these other different things, and that they feel like they have to look like that. They're receiving messages that they have to be flawless and thin, and that materialism through the right products will achieve that for them. And then ultimately that all of those things becoming flawless and thin and with the right products, that you can get man's attention, which is seen as the ultimate goal. You see headlines in magazines all the time, 5 ways to make him want you, or whatever you see. The really interesting thing that the girls found interesting, I did the pilot study on 6 adolescent girls ages 12 to 14, so there were 6th through 8th grade girls, and they found this part most interesting too. As you see, this is a picture of Barbie, and this is a picture of just your regular average-sized woman. They're both 5'6", and then this is Libby with Barbie's proportions, with her same height. Do you see how off-balance she looks? It's not natural at all. It really doesn't even look good, and especially this one. this is Livy with Barbie's waist of 29 inches. I mean, she looks ridiculous. Let's be honest, you know? After that, we talked more about their identity and who they are and how they become, you know, young women of character and all of those different things. And then the road to confidence, which was to beware of this facade that these standards that they see are not realistic. This is not a reality of who they must become. And they also, we encourage them to get real role models and then to choose a lifestyle that would allow them to have confidence. My results, which I decided to do 2 ways. Like I said, I did a pre-test and a post-test, and the average score out of a possible 55 points was 45, which is really high, you might say, and that's great, but when they retook their test, there was only a 1.6 difference in more or less self-esteem, which, you know, we decided in further development would be better if maybe this study was a little bit longer, more sessions that maybe act as a more support group rather than just a one-time lesson or learning unit. But those results really didn't yield any significant data there. But the really interesting data that we found was qualitative in the drawings that we found. 5 out of the 6 girls that drew these pictures for me mentioned that they wanted tan, dark, or imperfect skin. So they wanted to change their complexion and the way that they looked. 5 out of 6. The second thing that we saw was 4 out of the 6 girls wanted better hair. They wanted specifically, 3 out of the 4 girls who said that wanted blonde hair. And then one girl mentioned that she wanted long, blonde, curly hair, as you can see here, opposed to short brown hair, which is very interesting to me. And then 3 out of the 6 girls said that they wanted to have, I mean, and you have to think, they're 6th through 8th grade girls, and these girls were not big by any means, but they wanted to be skinnier and have a smaller body size, which for me was like, what, you're in 6th grade. But here in this example I had, this is from the activity, and this is where they drew a picture of themselves versus their ideal self. And I hope you can see this, but in here she's drawn a picture of her belly sticking out. And on here I told them that they could write a description if they didn't feel comfortable drawing, so she did both. But she mentions either being taller and skinny, and if you can see right here, there's hardly no belly or anything there. So that was that kind of shook me a little bit, and I just thought, how interesting, these girls are not big in the least bit, and they're already concerned about those kinds of things. The next thing that we found was that the girls wanted to change their eye color. They all wanted blue eyes. One girl wanted black eyes, I think, but for the most part, they all wanted blue eyes. I thought that was really interesting, too. And then the last thing, none of them wrote this down, but as I was evaluating their scores, I started to realize the difference in their facial expressions that they drew. And as I realized this, I was like kind of looking back through them, and what I noticed was that over half of the girls, they drew pictures of themselves with smiles on and being like happy, and then in their ideal self, they were kind of sassy looking, like they had either like straight lines, nothing going on there, or you can see this little smirk. I mean, she's got the little, she's working it with her lips, got that little sassy attitude. And then the other thing, if they weren't that, then it was the opposite. And then the other 2 girls, one of them was the same. She had smiles both times. But the 2 girls that weren't sassy, they had straight lined faces in their pictures of themselves. They were just kind of like there. And they were smiling in their ideal self, which makes me feel like these girls in their ideal version of themselves, they want to be happy. So right now they're clearly not happy with something about themselves, or their mood was off that day. But just very interesting results that I found there. So you're asking, what in the world does this mean? Well, to me, it shows that they desire to look like the culture. They desire to look like this distorted image, this stereotype. They want to look like those models that you just saw in the video. The thing that I found most interesting, I think, is that when I was going over this, I realized these girls didn't know the truth. Because when they asked in their survey, I asked, what is the most influential person in your life? Majority of them said my parents. but it's hard to believe that their parents would push these ideals on them, as they're already, like I said, just, you know, petite, beautiful little girls. So it's clear that they don't know the truth about themselves. They don't know the truth about their identity. So this is so important in that aspect. The other thing is that the media was a heavier influence on them than they ever thought, because they didn't mention the media as, which was an option, they didn't mention the media as their influencer. But according to these pictures that they drew, the media was a bigger influence than they let on. This also goes along with social learning theory, which is the theory that when a child sees someone older than them doing it, they look for role models, and then they want to become like their role models. Kind of like a monkey see, monkey do, like a little boy who follows his dad around and does everything his dad does. It's very similar to that. These girls are looking to the, you know, older girls their age, and in these advertisements, and even college girls, you know, my age and some of you girls' age in here, they're looking for us to be an example. And what are they finding? Because we've been influenced by this perception also. So they're being influenced by the culture, the media around them. This is important because identity development is so crucial in adolescence age, which is why I picked this age group to do my pilot study on. During this time, they either find themselves, they're looking for their identity, or they go into role confusion, according to Erik Erikson. I don't know how much of that is really, I believe, but I do believe that this is such a critical time for their development. This is the time when they're learning about who they want to become, the people that they want to associate with, and the person that they will eventually be, character-wise, in their gifts, their talents, their abilities. Another reason why this is so important is because these girls, the girls that I did the pilot study on, are the future role models for the up-and-coming generation. If these girls are projecting the same images that they have seen, then there's just going to be a cycle of low self-esteem, a cycle of self-disrespect, where they don't respect themselves and they aren't achieving as much as they could. We want these girls to be able to impact the world in such a strong, influential way. And it's so important because they will be the next role models, the future. And then in conclusion, it's kind of obvious, but we want to talk about inner beauty. It's so important that women are not just objectified and looked at as sexy objects or the object of desire, but that everyone, even men and women both alike, have a lot to offer the world in their character and who they are, and that is really what affects the world. That is really what impacts change. You know, you don't have to be just the perfect model or the perfect body to impact the world and make a difference. It's really what's on the inside that counts. Thank you.